Touch me. Kill me. Chapter 7. The morning after the end of the world. Dex was making eggs. This was Dex's crisis protocol. When the world ended, when the supernatural invaded, when 3 people crossed a line under the northern lights that could never be uncrossed, you made eggs. Scrambled because scrambled was forgiving. With butter because butter was non-negotiable. In a cast iron pan, because Dex trusted cast iron the way other people trusted God. He was making eggs in my kitchen. In my apartment above the bookshop. At 7 a.m., shirtless. Because Dex had apparently decided that shirts were a casualty of whatever new reality we were living in. The muscles of his back moving as he worked the spatula. And I was standing in the doorway watching him exist in my space, and feeling like someone had rearranged the furniture of my entire life, while I was sleeping. Theo sat at my kitchen table with coffee and Isolde's journal, reading with the laser focus of a man using scholarship as a shield against feelings. His glasses were on. His collar was buttoned to the top. His walls were constructed from academic rigor and the faint, persistent hope that if he concentrated hard enough on proto-Telengit binding language, he wouldn't have to think about the fact that Dex Moran had kissed him on a clifftop 6 hours ago, and the world had literally glowed. Nobody had said a word about last night. So, Dex said, cracking an egg one-handed without turning around. Are we going to be weird about this? We're already weird about this, Theo said, turning a page. We were weird about this before last night, I said. Now we're weird about this with data. Dex turned. The grin was there. But underneath it was something new, something raw. The expression of a man who'd shown his hand and was waiting to see if the bet would ruin him or save him. Data's good. I like data. Data means it happened and we can't pretend it didn't. Nobody's pretending, I said, which was a lie, because Theo was absolutely pretending, and the intensity with which he was not looking up from the journal was its own form of declaration. Every contact in the small kitchen was loaded. Dex's hip brushed mine as he reached for plates, a touch that would have been meaningless yesterday and now carried the weight of everything we'd done. Theo's fingers grazed mine over the coffee pot, and the contact lasted a fraction of a second too long, and his eyes flicked to mine and away so fast that I almost missed the heat in them. Almost. We were 3 people who now knew, I literally, through psychic vision. They through the unmistakable evidence of bodies and breath and the sounds they'd made. Exactly what the others felt. The knowledge made ordinary proximity into a minefield of sensation. Reaching for the salt was an act of courage. Passing a plate was a negotiation. When Dex leaned across me to grab a mug, his bare forearm sliding along my shoulder, I felt the psychic hum of his desire like a note struck on a tuning fork, and I had to grip the counter to steady myself. Breakfast had never been this charged. I ate eggs and drank coffee and sat in the narrow kitchen of my occult bookshop apartment, between a shirtless fisherman and a bespectacled spy. Spy, don't forget. The Meridian folder, the surveillance photo, the fact that the man who held your hand at 2 a.m. has a dossier on you, filed under field operative. And the competing signals of desire and suspicion and genuine affection were so tangled that I couldn't tell where one ended and the others began. Theo had been translating since 5 a.m. What he'd found froze the eggs in my stomach. The circle isn't just 7 anchor points, he said, spreading his notes across my table with the organized precision of a man whose filing system was probably alphabetized by subcategory. It's a key. Each anchor is tuned to a specific frequency. He pointed to a diagram he'd drawn. Emotional frequencies. The first point, fear. That was Hank. His death was terrifying, and the terror is the resonance that holds the anchor. The second, duty. Jonas Kessler volunteered out of obligation to his family. The animal kills were instinct. The whale was grief. So each death is tuned to a feeling, I said. Each death captures a feeling, preserves it. Like a recording pressed into vinyl. The circle is a collection of recordings, and when they play simultaneously, they create a chord, I finished. A frequency that matches the barrier between dimensions. Exactly. Theo paused. The 7th point, The seer's position requires desire, not casual wanting. The specific resonance of someone who wants something so completely that the wanting becomes its own force, its own frequency. Silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, the ocean murmured its eternal monologue. She built a ritual that runs on horniness, I said. Dex from the stove. To be fair, most rituals probably should. Theo, still not looking up. The clinical term is psychosexual resonance. Theo, I love you, but if you call it psychosexual resonance one more time, I'm throwing that journal in the ocean. The word love landed in the room like a grenade with the pin pulled. Dex's hand stilled on the spatula. Theo's pen stopped moving. I stopped breathing. The word had been casual. Dex's verbal shorthand, the way he talked to everyone he cared about. Throwaway, meaningless. Except his voice had dropped half a register on the word, and the way he was very carefully not looking at Theo, looking instead at the pan, at the eggs, at the stove he'd been cooking on, as if it contained the secrets of the universe, suggested that the casualness was a costume, and the word underneath was terrifyingly naked. Nobody addressed it. We were not ready. The eggs were getting cold. I ate them anyway, because in the hierarchy of crises, supernatural murder circles outranked romantic revelations, but only barely. I went downstairs to the bookshop to check on things, and found Vera in the rare books section, examining the mysterious leather-bound book that had appeared in the epilogue of my nightmares. It's updating, she said, without turning. The drawings are more detailed than yesterday. See, here, the entities in the water. Yesterday they were shapes. Today they have features. I looked. She was right. The shimmering ink illustrations of the things rising from the deep were more defined. Not human features, exactly, but structures. Organs of perception. Ways of sensing the world that had no analog in human biology. Vera, Eleanor said something about you and Isolde. That you were close. Vera's ghost went very still. The rare books section, always the warmest part of the shop, grew noticeably cooler. Eleanor should learn to mind her own business. Were you in love with her? A long pause. The kind of pause that contained decades. I loved her the way you love the two upstairs, Vera said finally. Completely, impossibly, in a way that the world wasn't built to accommodate. She turned to face me, and her spectral features held an expression I'd never seen on her, not in life, not in death. Tenderness without the protective lacquer of humor. Isolde was brilliant and fierce, and she laughed like the world was a comedy, only she understood. She could do things with blood magic that made the rest of us look like children. And she touched me. Vera's voice cracked. Ghosts should not be able to crack. She touched me and I saw everything she was, and none of it was small. You had the gift too? All Cains do. Mine was weaker than yours. I could sense emotions through touch, but not memories, not detailed visions. Enough to know that what Isolde felt for me was real. She dimmed. And enough to know, when the time came, that sealing her away would destroy her. I did it anyway. The bookshop was very quiet. Upstairs, I could hear Dex and Theo moving around my kitchen. The clink of dishes being washed, the murmur of their voices, the sound of two men navigating a shared space. Downstairs, my grandmother's ghost mourned a love she'd been forced to betray. The parallel was not lost on me. I sent them to the harbor together. They needed to check for residual energy at the waterfront anchor points, but the real reason was simpler. They needed to exist in the same space without me between them, serving as buffer and distraction and excuse. They knew what I was doing. They went anyway. I learned later what happened on the dock, partly from Vera, who had eavesdropped psychically because ghosts had the boundaries of a reality show camera crew, and partly from Dex himself, who told me about it weeks later in a voice so quiet, it was almost a confession. They checked the crab pots, a useful excuse for proximity to the water. Working side by side, hauling traps, the mechanical rhythm of physical labor providing a structure that conversation couldn't. Dex broke the silence. Last night. On the cliff. When I kissed her and then when you turned to me, Theo finished. His voice was careful. Clinical, almost, as if he could manage this the way he managed a diagnosis, with precision and professional detachment. Yeah, what about it? Did you want me to? The crab pot hit the dock. Theo had put it down, set it down deliberately, the way he did everything, but the deliberateness itself was telling, because it meant he needed his hands free, or needed to not be holding something, or needed the physical act of setting something down to mirror the emotional act of what he was about to do. He took off his glasses, looked at Dex with the full, unshielded intensity that he usually kept dimmed behind lenses and composure, and the careful professional distance that was. Dex was beginning to understand. Not distance at all, but a form of protection so practiced, it had become invisible. Dexter, I have wanted you to do that since the day you pulled me out of the harbor when I fell off the dock, carrying too many medical supplies. You were laughing, you were soaking wet. You called me Doc. A pause. That was 3 years ago, so yes, I wanted you to. The harbor went on being a harbor. Boats rocked, gulls screamed. The water slapped against the pilings with the patience of an element that had been doing its job since before humans had names for things. Dex reached out and fixed Theo's collar, which didn't need fixing. His fingers lingered on Theo's neck, the pulse point, the warm skin below the ear, the place where tendons and muscle met jaw. The touch was gentle and absolutely deliberate, and lasted approximately 3 centuries compressed into 5 seconds. 3 years? Dex said softly. 3 years. I'm an idiot. You're many things. An idiot is occasionally one of them. Neither of them moved. It was not a kiss. It was the space a kiss would occupy, held open, vibrating with potential energy, the emotional equivalent of the moment before a wave breaks. And it was, in its own way, more intimate than a kiss would have been, because it was a choice. The choice to stand in the wanting and acknowledge it without rushing to resolve it. Back at the bookshop, I found the second design. Vera had told me to look for it. Isolde was always building 2 things at once. Cross-referencing the journal with Vera's old notebooks, my grandmother's handwriting, familiar and beloved, a ghost legacy in ink, I found the nested pattern. A secondary design hidden inside the primary circle. The outer circle was the key. The inner pattern was a filter, a specification for what came through the door. Isolde hadn't just been building an entrance. She'd been building a custom entrance. For something specific. The town was getting strange around me. Ravens on every rooftop, watching with an intelligence that birds shouldn't have. The tide running backward, the singing from empty rooms. Wren called from the abyss. The glass floor was humming, a chord that patrons felt in their teeth. It's not one sound, Wren said. It's a choir. Something down there is harmonizing with itself. I stood on the cliff path at dusk and felt the hum stronger than ever. But it had changed, not a single note anymore but a composition. The deep one wasn't just calling. It was preparing. Vera appeared, dim, strained. Those boys of yours, the way you feel about them, it's not a complication. It's the architecture. Isolde designed the circle for a seer with one great desire. You have 2 sources, that's a variable. Good variable or bad variable. Different. Different can be anything. She flickered. Don't be afraid of what you want, darling. Be afraid of anyone who tries to use it against you. She vanished just as Dex and Theo burst through the bookshop door together, out of breath, their energy different than when they'd left. Something between them having shifted. With news from the harbor. A fishing boat had come in with its crew unconscious, every man marked with binding symbols, the hold full of stones. Warm, smooth, humming stones, each one vibrating a different note, arranged on the deck in the pattern of the binding circle. A miniature, a prototype, powered by the crew's dreaming minds. I picked up one of the stones. The vision, the ocean floor. The cathedral of light. The deep one, no longer still, no longer patient. Rising, swimming upward, slowly, steadily, toward the surface. And behind it, in the deep dark below, at the very edge of my psychic range, something else. Moving, following. Something the deep one was running from. I dropped the stone. My hands were shaking. "What did you see?" Theo asked. "The deep one is rising," I said. "And it's not the biggest thing down there." Expand the morning after kitchen scene with domestic trio detail. Dex cooked like a man conducting a symphony with a spatula. He moved through my kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd claimed the space, reaching over my head for the spice rack, his chest an inch from my face. The smell of him a full-body event, opening drawers he'd learned the contents of, using the cast-iron pan he'd brought from his cabin because mine was a travesty, his word, delivered with sincere horror. Theo drank coffee like a man performing a ritual. 2 hands around the mug, eyes closed for the first sip. The steam fogging his glasses, which he removed, cleaned, replaced. Without the glasses, his face in the morning light was young. Younger than 28. Younger than a man carrying 6 years of espionage and 3 years of unrequited love should look. His dark curls were mussed from sleep. He'd dozed on my couch for 2 hours, the only one of us who'd managed any rest. And I'd watched him sleep for longer than I was proud of, memorizing the way his face softened, the way his lips parted, the slow rhythm of his breathing. The kitchen was too small for 3 people and a cast-iron pan, which meant constant contact. Dex's hip brushing mine as he reached for plates. Theo's knee touching mine under the table. My hand grazing Theo's over the coffee pot and lingering, just a second, just long enough for a flash of his morning state. Warm, sleepy, cautiously happy, his body still carrying the sense memory of the cliff, the kiss, Dex's mouth on his. We hadn't discussed sleeping arrangements. The question of where does the trio sleep had been answered, for one night, by the simple fact that we'd arrived at my apartment at 4 a.m. after a supernatural crisis. And Dex had taken the bed, and Theo had taken the couch, and I'd taken the armchair, and nobody had slept enough to make any of those choices intentional. But the morning light was making the question unavoidable. 3 coffee cups on my table. 3 bodies in my kitchen. The math of my apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 couch that was not long enough for Theo's legs, was insufficient for the emotional configuration we were becoming. "We need to talk about logistics," I said, because someone had to. "Logistics." Dex cracked another egg one-handed. "Like where people sleep." "Like where people sleep." "Like whose apartment has the most space." "Like, my cabin's got 1 room and a bed that's barely big enough for me," Dex said. "Theo's apartment has actual rooms but is above a medical clinic, which has specific mood implications." "Your place has the bookshop," Theo said, not looking up from the journal. "Which means it has Vera." "Vera is dead and has no opinions about my sleeping arrangements. Vera is dead and has opinions about everything." As if summoned, Vera's ghostly voice drifted from the stairwell. "I have no objection to the arrangement as long as I'm not subjected to sounds I can't unhear." "There it is," Theo said. Dex grinned. The grin was back, the real one, devastating, transforming his whole face. "We'll be discreet." "Dexter," Vera said, "you have never been discreet about anything in your life, and I respect that, but please respect that I was born in 1935, and there are limits to what I can process." "Noted, Mrs. Kane." "It's Vera. If you're going to sleep with my granddaughter, we should be on a first-name basis." The blush that climbed Dex's neck and face was, objectively, the most satisfying thing I'd seen in weeks. Theo made a sound that was unmistakably a laugh, quickly disguised as a cough, and I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the absurdity of my life. A ghost grandmother establishing ground rules for a polyamorous relationship, while 2 supernaturally adjacent men ate eggs, and I felt, for the first time in as long as I could remember, something that might have been happiness. Expand the Dex/Theo doc scene with more physical detail. Dex hauled crab pots with the methodical rhythm of someone whose body knew the work so well, it operated on autopilot. Haul, check, rebait, lower, repeat. The physical labor was a language he spoke fluently, his back muscles working under his thermal shirt, his forearms flexing with each pull, the controlled strength in his grip visible even from Theo's position 5 feet away. Theo was supposed to be checking the harbor for residual supernatural energy. Instead, he was watching Dex haul crab pots and cataloging, with the involuntary precision of a man trained in observation, every detail of the process. The way Dex's body rotated with the pull, the shift of weight from one leg to the other, the way his jeans sat on his hips, low, always low, a gap of skin visible between the waistband and the hem of his shirt when he reached overhead. The silence was thick. Dex broke it. Last night, on the cliff, when I kissed her and then when you turned to me, Theo finished. His voice was careful, clinical. The professional mask deployed automatically in emotional situations, a defense mechanism so practiced it was nearly invisible. Yeah, what about it? Did you want me to? Theo put down the crab pot he'd been pretending to examine. Straightened. Took off his glasses, the gesture that meant the mask was coming off, the walls were lowering, the real Theo was stepping into the light. Without the glasses, his eyes were dark and enormous, and full of a feeling he'd been hiding behind prescription lenses for 3 years. He looked at Dex, really looked, with the full devastating attention he usually reserved for medical crises and rare book catalogs. And Dex felt the weight of that gaze like a physical force. Dexter, I have wanted you to do that since the day you pulled me out of the harbor when I fell off the dock, carrying too many medical supplies. You were laughing, you were soaking wet. You called me Doc. Your shirt was plastered to your chest, and your arms were around me, and you smelled like the ocean and something else, something warm, something yours, and I thought, oh no. Oh no. He paused. That was 3 years ago. So yes, I wanted you to. Dex reached out. Not to his face, to his collar. Fixed it. An unnecessary adjustment, the kind of thing you did when you needed an excuse to touch someone. His fingers lingered on Theo's neck, finding the pulse point, the warm skin, the place where jaw met ear. The touch was gentle, gentler than Dex usually was, as if Theo's admission had made him fragile rather than bold. 3 years? Dex said softly. 3 years. I'm an idiot. You're many things. An idiot is occasionally one of them. Dex's thumb traced the line of Theo's jaw, down to his chin, tilted his face up, a gesture that was 1 degree removed from a kiss, close enough that they were breathing each other's air. I want to kiss you, Dex said. Properly, not on a cliff with the world ending. Just here, on the dock, where it started. The dock where I fell in. The dock where I caught you. Theo's hand came up and covered Dex's, pressed it harder against his jaw, holding it there. A permission, an anchor. And Dex kissed him. Not the urgent collision of the clifftop. This was different. Slow, intentional. The kind of kiss that 2 men gave each other when they had 3 years of friendship to honor and a lifetime of possibility to begin. Dex's mouth against Theo's was warm and careful and thorough, and Theo made a sound, a small, broken sound, the sound of something long held finally released, and kissed him back with the focused intensity that he brought to everything he cared about. The harbor didn't care. The boats rocked on their lines. The gulls screamed. The water slapped the pilings. 2 men kissed on a dock in the Alaskan morning light, and the world went on around them, and neither of them noticed. Expand Vera's lore about Isolde with more emotional depth. I went downstairs to check the bookshop and found Vera in the rare book section, more solid than usual, examining the mysterious leather-bound book. It's updating, she said. The drawings are more detailed than yesterday. Vera, Eleanor said something about you and Isolde. Vera's ghost went still. The rare book section grew noticeably cooler. Eleanor talks too much. Were you in love with her? A silence that contained decades. Vera's spectral form flickered, the equivalent of a living person's composure cracking. I loved her the way you love the 2 upstairs, Vera said. Completely, impossibly, in a way that the world wasn't built to accommodate. She turned to face me. We were 25 when we met. I'd just inherited the bookshop. She was visiting from wherever the Hargroves had scattered to. She walked in looking for a first edition. Crowley and I looked at her and I knew. Not through my gift, through something older. Something that didn't need psychic verification. What was she like? Brilliant, fierce. She laughed like the world was a comedy only she could see. She could do things with blood magic that made the rest of us look like children playing with matches. Vera's voice changed, softened, warmed, the dry wit giving way to something unguarded. She had this way of touching people, not psychically, physically. She'd put her hand on your arm when she talked to you, and you'd feel seen, acknowledged. She was the most tactile person I'd ever met, which was ironic given that I was the one with the touch gift. Did she know about your abilities? She knew everything. She was the first person I told, the first person I showed. I took off my gloves and held her hand, and she let me see her, all of her, without flinching. Do you know how rare that is? To find someone who doesn't flinch when you see their truth? I thought about Dex. Whatever you saw, I'm not sorry for it. I thought about Theo. This is the most real thing about me. I know exactly how rare that is, I said. She touched me and I saw everything she was, and none of it was small. Vera's form shimmered with something that looked like tears, if ghosts could cry. We had 10 years together, not always in the same place. She traveled, researched, went places I couldn't follow. But we were together in the way that mattered. We were each other's person. And then you sealed her. And then I sealed her. The temperature in the bookshop dropped several degrees. She came to me in 1989 and told me what was happening. The deep one reaching through, trying to merge with her consciousness, trying to wear her body like a suit. She was terrified. Not of the deep one, of herself. Of what she might become if the merger succeeded. She said, Vera, I would rather be nowhere than be not me. She asked you to do it. She held my hand, looked me in the eye, said, seal me away, before I open the door. Before I become something I can't live with. And Vera's voice broke. I put my arms around her and I held her, and I activated the seal, and she looked at me as it took her and she said, I understand. And then she was gone, and the space where she'd been was empty. 35 years of empty. I was crying. Vera was not crying. Ghosts couldn't cry. But doing whatever ghosts did when grief was too large to contain. The parallel, I said, between you and Isolde, and me and... I know, I see it. A seer who loves deeply, who finds people who don't flinch from her truth. A connection that generates power. An impossible choice between love and safety. Vera's spectral eyes met mine. Don't make my mistake, Marlow. I chose safety. I sealed away the person I loved to protect the town. And I spent 35 years regretting it. What would you do differently? I'd find the third option, not love or safety. Love and safety. The option I was too afraid to look for. She flickered. You have 2 people upstairs who love you. Who generate power with you that Isolde and I never achieved, because there are 3 of you, and 3 is a more stable configuration than 2. Use that. Don't sacrifice. Don't choose between them and the world. Find the way that includes everything. She vanished. The bookshop was quiet. Upstairs, Dex and Theo were laughing about something. The sound traveled through the floorboards. Warm, human, alive. Chapter 8. What Came Out. 60 miles of gravel road at 2 a.m., and I was sandwiched between the 2 men I was trying very hard not to be in love with while racing toward a supernatural crisis at the commune 60 miles east. The truck cab was a pressure cooker of unresolved tension, residual aurora energy, and the lingering electricity of a kiss, or rather, a series of kisses involving multiple configurations of 3 mouths that none of us had processed. Dex drove like the road was a personal enemy. The truck's headlights carved tunnels through old-growth forest, the trees pressing close on both sides, their trunks enormous and ancient and indifferent to our urgency. Theo was in the back seat, phone to his ear, getting updates from Sage with the clipped efficiency of a man managing a crisis. Medical questions. Were the affected residents responsive? Were their vitals stable? What was their level of consciousness? Each question was precise, professional, the doctor in full deployment, but his free hand was gripping the back of my seat, his knuckles white, and I could feel his anxiety radiating through the contact point, like heat through glass. The aurora was still going, but wrong. The colors had shifted toward red, arterial red, warning red, and pulsed in a rhythm that matched the hum from the water. The sky looked like it was having a heartbeat. We arrived at the range to find it broken open. The stone formation, the standing stones that had been there since before the founding, since before European contact, since before whatever human memory could account for, had cracked. Split down the center as if something inside had outgrown its container. The exposed interior glowed with the same bioluminescent blue as the cave symbols, and the hum was deafening here. Not just audible but physical, a vibration that I felt in my teeth, in my lungs, in the marrow of my bones. Sage met us at the perimeter. She was composed. Sage was always composed, but the composure had a brittleness to it, a careful arrangement of calm over something seismic. "It walked out 2 hours ago," she said. "Male presenting, beautiful." She paused. "Too beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you forget what you were doing, what you were thinking, what you were afraid of." Another pause. "Everyone he touches enters a state of, I don't have a clinical word for it. Bliss, completion, as if they've been found after a lifetime of being lost." 12 residents were affected. They sat in a circle around the entity, holding hands, humming. The sound was the same frequency as the deep water hum, but coming from human throats it was heartbreaking, a choir of people singing a song they'd never learned. The entity itself stood at the center. It looked human, almost. The proportions were slightly too symmetrical, the skin slightly too smooth, the stillness between movements slightly too complete. Like a photograph of a person rather than a person. It was naked. Apparently interdimensional beings didn't emerge with a wardrobe, and beautiful in a way that bypassed aesthetics and went straight to something neurological. Looking at it made you want to be near it. Looking away required effort. I approached. Because of course I did. "Seer," it said. Its voice resonated in my rib cage. "We know you. You are the 7th point." I touched it. The vision was oceanic. Not a memory, a state of being. I experienced the entity's consciousness from the inside. Vast, ancient, operating on principles that had nothing to do with human cognition. It didn't understand boundaries because it had no concept of separation. In its dimension, consciousness was shared. Every being was part of every other being, and the idea of an individual self was as foreign to it as echolocation was to a human. It was touching people because that's how it communicated. And what it communicated was everything. Memory, desire, fear, joy, the complete architecture of a person's inner life, offered freely and received in return. The bliss the residents felt was the experience of being fully known, every secret revealed, every shame dissolved, every lonely corner of their consciousness illuminated by an attention so total it felt like love. But threaded through the alien consciousness, Isolde's fingerprints. She was connected to the entity like a puppet master to a marionette, channeling its communion drive toward specific purposes, building anchor points not through death and fear, but through pleasure and surrender. The entity didn't know it was being used. It was simply doing what it did, reaching out, connecting, sharing. Isolde had aimed that impulse like a weapon. "It's not the villain," I told Dex and Theo. "It's being used." Theo took charge of the medical crisis, checking vitals, assessing neurological function, working through the affected residents with a competence that was, again, several orders of magnitude beyond what a small-town GP should possess. Dex noticed. I noticed. The file in Theo's apartment pulsed in my memory. We contained the entity in the bathhouse, the most warded space on the range. In the hot springs, it calmed, glowed softer, spoke to me in waves of meaning rather than words. The deep one wants to come home. The barrier is thin here. The woman with the old blood, she promised. Dawn. The three of us outside the bathhouse, backs against the stone wall, the Alaskan sunrise painting the sky in colors I didn't have names for. So, Dex said, are we going to talk about it, or pretend the Northern Lights made us crazy? The Northern Lights didn't make us crazy, Theo said. No, I said. We were already crazy. The Northern Lights just lit us up. We talked. It was halting and honest and terrifying. The conversational equivalent of walking a tightrope without a net. Dex said he was done pretending. Theo said he was scared of what he'd lose. I said I was scared of what I'd see, that being fully intimate with people I loved this much, with my gift wide open, might shatter me. Dex took my left hand. Theo took my right. The double vision washed through me. Two rivers of desire converging, Dex's oceanic and Theo's precise, harmonizing into something that sounded like the hum but warmer. Human. I can survive this, I whispered. Shouting from the bathhouse. The entity, screaming. Warning. The symbols on the walls rearranging themselves. A countdown. Sage's translation was hollow. The sixth anchor is being set. Right now, in town. My phone. 17 missed calls from Ren. Ren's voice, barely a whisper. Marlow. Someone is dead in the back room. The glass floor is cracked. Something is trying to come up through the water. Expand the drive to the range, with trio physical tension. Insert after the truck cab was a pressure cooker equivalent. The last 20 miles of gravel road were the worst. Washboard sections that vibrated through the truck frame and into our bodies, jarring us together in ways that would have been funny under other circumstances. Every pothole bounced my shoulder against Dex's arm, my knee against the gearshift, Theo's hand against the back of my neck where it gripped the headrest. The physical contact was constant, incidental, and utterly charged. Theo's phone conversation with Sage ended. He set the phone down and leaned forward, his forearms on the back of our seats, his face close enough that I could smell his particular scent. Cedar, clean cotton, the faint medical sharpness of antiseptic that never fully washed out. His breath was warm on my ear when he spoke. 12 affected. All former entity touched from the stone formation. The entity is establishing a communion circle. Each person it touches becomes a node in a network. If it reaches critical mass, the network could become self-sustaining. Self-sustaining meaning what? Dex asked, taking a curve that pressed me firmly against his side. Meaning the affected residents could lose individual consciousness permanently. Merge into a collective. Like the deep one, I said. A shared awareness, no boundaries. Exactly like the deep one, but using human brains as hardware instead of an alien consciousness. Theo's voice was clinical, but the hand on the headrest had found my hair and was absently, unconsciously, threading through it. The entity doesn't understand that human consciousness isn't designed for merger. Our brains have boundaries for a reason. Dissolve those boundaries without the right substrate and you get brain death, Dex finished. Eventually, yes. The truck cab went cold despite the heater. Expand the entity encounter and the Dawn Trio scene. The entity's effect on the 12 residents was visible in ways that were both beautiful and horrifying. Their faces in the bioluminescent light were peaceful, not just calm but radiant, glowing with an inner contentment that made me think of saints in Renaissance paintings. The woman closest to me, Mika, the one who'd been missing, had tear tracks drying on her cheeks, but she was smiling. Not the vacant smile of someone drugged. The specific, luminous smile of someone who had been found after a lifetime of being lost. I understood the appeal at a cellular level. For someone who spent her life behind gloves, flinching from contact, the entity's offer was water in a desert. Be known, be seen, give up the loneliness. My gift did something similar but cruder. I invaded people's consciousness through touch, taking their secrets without asking. The entity offered the same thing gently, voluntarily, beautifully. It was everything my gift could be, if my gift had been designed by something that understood consent. And that understanding, that the entity was, in some ways, a better version of me, was the most frightening thing about it. Theo worked through the night. I watched him move between affected residents, checking vitals, assessing neurological function, his body operating with the fluid efficiency of someone whose training had prepared him for exactly this kind of crisis. Except his training, I was increasingly certain, hadn't come from any medical school. He'd pushed up his sleeves. The clinic coat was gone. He was in a gray thermal that clung to his lean frame, revealing the subtle architecture of his body, the deltoids, the forearms, the way his torso narrowed from shoulders to waist, in a line that was more elegant than muscular, but no less compelling. Theo's body was a study in controlled precision, everything measured, everything intentional, and watching him work, watching the competence and the care, was its own form of attraction. "You're staring," Dex said from beside me. He was leaning against the bathhouse wall, arms crossed, his own body a different kind of spectacle, broad where Theo was lean, solid where Theo was angular, still faintly steaming from the bathhouse warmth. "I'm observing." "You're staring at Theo the way I stare at the ocean." He bumped my shoulder with his. "It's okay, I stare at him too." "You do? Kane, I've been staring at that man for 3 years. You think I don't know what staring looks like?" Something about the admission, casual, unbothered, secure, released a tension I'd been carrying since the cliff. Dex wasn't jealous. He wasn't threatened. He watched me want Theo with the same easy acceptance that he watched the tide come in. "How do you do that?" I asked. "Not be jealous. Because it's not a competition. It's..." He searched for the word. "An ecosystem. You and me are one thing. Theo and me are one thing. You and Theo are one thing. The 3 of us together are a 4th thing. None of those things diminish the others." He grinned. "I'm a fisherman, not a philosopher, but even I can tell that what we've got is bigger than 2. Dawn. Outside the bathhouse. Exhausted, raw, 3 people who'd crossed every line in a single night. Dex dropped to the ground, his back against the stone wall, legs stretched out. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. Theo lowered himself carefully on my other side, more deliberate, folding his long legs, adjusting his position until his knee rested against mine. The sunrise was painting the sky in colors I didn't have names for. Pinks that shaded into gold that bled into a blue so deep it looked edible. The range was coming alive around us, smoke from kitchen fires, voices, someone playing guitar in one of the yurts. Normal morning sounds. As if an interdimensional entity hadn't emerged from a stone formation 8 hours ago and started dissolving people's individual consciousness through touch. "So," Dex said, "are we going to talk about it or pretend the Northern Lights made us crazy?" "The Northern Lights didn't make us crazy," Theo said. "We were already crazy," I said. "The Northern Lights just lit us up." A pause. The sunrise deepened. A raven called from the trees. "I want this," Dex said. Bluntly, because Dex was constitutionally incapable of approaching emotional statements with anything less than full speed. "Whatever this is, the 3 of us. I want it. I don't care that it's complicated or unusual or that there isn't a Hallmark card for it. I want both of you." Theo was quiet, processing the way he processed everything, with deliberate care. When he spoke, his voice was measured but his hands were shaking. "I'm scared. Of what I'll lose if this goes wrong. Of what I've already..." He stopped himself. The meridian confession, still unspoken, sat behind his teeth like a swallowed stone. "I'm scared of losing the 2 best people I've ever known because I wanted more than friendship." "You can't lose us," I said. "We're not going anywhere. You don't know that. I know that I'm sitting here at dawn after fighting an entity, and the only people I want next to me are the 2 people next to me. I know that when the Deep One offered me connection, total, permanent, cosmic connection, I said no because what I already have is better. I reached for their hands. Left and right, bare skin. I know that when I touch you, what I feel isn't just desire. It's home. Dex's hand, warm, calloused, the marked palm dim and quiet. Through the contact, his love, oceanic, vast, elemental. Theo's hand, precise, steady, the surgeon's fingers curling around mine. Through the contact, his love, architectural, deliberate, built to last. Both of them, wanting me and wanting each other, the separate frequencies harmonizing into something that sounded like music. Not the deep one's alien hum. Something human. Something ours. Trio domestic moment at the range during crisis. Between the medical triaging and the entity containment, there was a moment, a small one, easily missed in the chaos, that I filed away as evidence that whatever we were becoming was real. 3 a.m. The range's communal kitchen. Dex making instant coffee with the expression of a man being asked to commit a war crime. He had opinions about coffee. Theo sitting on the counter, legs dangling, writing notes on the affected resident's symptoms. Me standing between them, eating cold rice from a pot someone had left on the stove, because I hadn't eaten since yesterday, and my body was making its displeasure known. Dex handed me a cup. Our fingers overlapped on the handle, and the brief contact sent a flash through me, not a full vision, just a warm pulse of feeling. His concern for me. His desire, persistent and low-grade, like a pilot light that never went out. His awareness of Theo sitting 3 feet away, legs swinging, and the particular tenderness that seeing Theo in vulnerability, tired, worried, his glasses askew, provoked in Dex's chest. "You're both going to crash soon," Theo said, not looking up from his notes. "You've been running on adrenaline for 6 hours. Cortisol has a half-life, and when it drops..." "Doc." Dex set his coffee down. Walked to where Theo sat on the counter. Put his hands on either side of Theo's legs, bracketing him, not touching, just framing. "You've been awake longer than either of us. Your nose bled an hour ago, and you're giving us lectures about cortisol while your hands are shaking." Theo looked at his hands. They were indeed shaking. He put down the pen. "Come here," Dex said. Not a question. Theo leaned forward. Dex's arms went around him, a hug, simple and full. Theo's face against Dex's shoulder, Dex's hand on the back of his neck. Theo exhaled. The sound was small, private, the kind of sound a man made when he'd been holding himself together through force of will, and someone finally told him he could stop. I set down my rice. Crossed the small kitchen. Put my arms around both of them. Theo from behind, my chest against his back, my arms reaching around to find Dex's waist. A 3-person embrace in a communal kitchen at 3 a.m. in an Alaskan commune, with an interdimensional entity in the bathhouse, and 12 people in a psychic coma, and the fate of the town uncertain. It was the most peaceful 60 seconds of the entire investigation. Dex's chin rested on Theo's head. Theo's hands found mine around Dex's waist. I pressed my face between Theo's shoulder blades and breathed him in. Cedar, clean sweat, the faint antiseptic trace of medical work, and felt, through the triple contact, the gentle wash of their combined emotional state. Exhaustion, fear, and underneath both, like bedrock beneath turbulent water, love. Not the dramatic, aurora-lit, world-saving love of the clifftop. The quiet kind. The kind that made coffee and held people in kitchens and stayed awake through crises. The everyday kind that was, in the end, the kind that mattered most. "We should probably save the world," I mumbled into Theo's back. 5 more seconds, Dex said. We took 10. Major expansion, the entity encounter and commune atmosphere. The commune's nighttime face was different from its daytime one. In daylight, the range was all bright colors and functional beauty. At night, lit by fire pit glow and the bioluminescent spill from the cracked stone formation, it looked ancient, primal. The yurts were round shadows. The converted buses were sleeping beasts. And the people who were still awake, the ones who hadn't been touched by the entity, who were standing guard or huddling in clusters, looked at us with the wide eyes of people whose understanding of reality had been recently, violently revised. A woman named Jess, mid-30s, muscular, with the leathered hands of someone who built things for a living, intercepted us before we reached the entity. She was one of the range's informal leaders, the kind of person who organized work crews and resolved disputes, and made sure the compost system actually functioned. "It's not hostile," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I've been watching it since it emerged. It doesn't move aggressively, it doesn't threaten. It just reaches. And anyone it reaches touches this." She pressed her hand to her chest. "This feeling, like being hugged by the universe. Like every lonely second of your life suddenly made sense because it was all leading to this." "But you didn't let it touch you," Theo observed. "I've got a 3-year-old asleep in my yurt. Whatever that thing is offering, my kid needs her mom to stay her mom." Jess's jaw tightened. The 12 who were touched. They were all single. All searching. Kai, Lior, Mika. They came to the range because they were looking for connection. For community. For something that made the loneliness bearable. Her eyes found mine. The entity knew. It felt what they were missing, and it offered to fill it. That's not random, that's targeting. Her observation crystallized something I'd been intuiting. The entity wasn't just reaching blindly. It was selecting. Choosing the lonely, the seeking, the ones whose desire for connection was strongest. The ones who were most like me. The 12 affected residents sat in their circle, and up close, the scene was both heartbreaking and horrifying. Their faces in the blue-white light were radiant, peaceful in a way that transcended mere relaxation. This was the piece of people who had been searching for something their entire lives, and had impossibly found it. The woman closest to me, Mika, the one who'd been missing, had dried tear tracks on her cheeks, but her expression was luminous with satisfaction. Not drugged, not deceived, found. They hummed. The sound rose from 12 throats in perfect unison, not rehearsed but synchronized, as if the entity had given them access to a frequency that human vocal cords could reproduce, but human minds couldn't consciously generate. The hum matched the deep water frequency exactly. I felt it in my bones, in my gift, in the specific hollow behind my sternum where loneliness lived. The entity turned to face me as I approached. Its movements were not fluid, they were discrete, like a series of photographs played in sequence. Still, then moving, then still. Each position held with absolute precision, as if it was calculating the physical requirements of each gesture and executing them without the continuous flow that biological beings took for granted. "Seer," it said, "we know you. You are the 7th point." I touched it. The vision was oceanic. The communion consciousness was the most intimate psychic experience of my life. More intimate than the visions from Dex or Theo, more intimate than touching the dead. Because this entity didn't have walls. It didn't have secrets. It didn't have the subconscious barriers that every human carried. The defenses, the repressions, the carefully managed boundaries between self and other. It was completely, absolutely, terrifyingly open. Being inside its awareness was like swimming in warm water with no surface and no floor. Every direction was the same. Every perspective was accessible. I experienced its entire history in a flash. Emergence from the stone formation, confusion, wonder, sensory overload. The physical world was so much louder and sharper and more textured than its native dimension. Its first touch, a range resident named Sol, who'd been meditating near the formation when it emerged. The entity had reached for the nearest consciousness out of instinct, the way a newborn reaches for warmth. The communion, 12 people, joined their separate loneliness dissolving into shared presence, the most natural thing in its dimension, and the most alien thing in ours. And Isolde, threaded through the entity's awareness like a puppet master's strings, subtle, almost invisible, directing the communion drive towards specific purposes. Building anchor points not through death but through bliss. The entity didn't know it was being used because it had no framework for deception. In its dimension, motive was transparent. The concept of hidden agenda was as foreign as the concept of a private ocean. I pulled free, gasping. Dex caught me, his arms steady, his body warm against the cold, and Theo was there with water, and his physician's hands checking my pulse. "It's innocent," I said. "It's being used as a weapon, but it doesn't know what a weapon is." Isolde is channeling its communion drive, using the bliss to build anchor points. The 12 residents are nodes in a network she's constructing. "Can we disconnect them?" Sage asked from behind us. "Not without risking their minds. The communion has restructured their neural pathways. Pulling them out forcibly could cause neural shock," Theo finished. "I know. I've been seeing the same thing in their brain activity." Between the entity containment and the dawn reckoning, I found myself in the range's communal kitchen with a woman named Cora, one of Sage's elders, 70 years old, with long gray braids and hands that were stained with earth and herbs, and the particular pigment of someone who'd been working with plants that held other dimensional properties. She made me food without asking. Rice, beans, something green and unfamiliar that tasted like spinach crossed with lightning. I ate because my body demanded it, and my mind was too overwhelmed to object. "You're Vera Kane's granddaughter," Cora said. Not a question. She sat across from me at the long wooden table, her dark eyes steady and ancient in a young old face. "Everyone seems to know that. Everyone who matters." She poured 2 cups of something from a ceramic jug, warm, herbal, tasting of chamomile and something earthier. "Vera came here often, in the years before she died. Not to the commune, to the land. She'd walk the ley lines at dawn, barefoot, touching the earth with her palms. She said the convergence spoke to her." "What did it say?" "She never told me the words. But she always looked sad afterward. And determined. Like someone who'd received instructions she didn't want to follow." Cora sipped her tea. "The convergence is not neutral, Marlow. It's not just a geographical feature. It's an interface, a place where the membrane between worlds is thin enough for information to pass through. And the information it passes depends on who's listening." "What does it tell you?" "That something is changing. The barrier has been static for a century. Thick, stable, maintained by the founding family's pact. But in the last year, it's become dynamic, fluctuating, like a heartbeat where there used to be a flat line." She set down her cup. "The deep one's rising as a symptom, not a cause. The barrier itself is weakening. Not because of Isolde's circle. The circle is exploiting the weakness, not creating it. Something fundamental is changing in the relationship between our dimension and what's on the other side." "What's causing it?" "You," she said it simply, the way you'd say the tide or the wind, a natural force, not a choice. "You, Marlow, a Kane seer, the strongest in generations, living at the convergence point. Your gift interacts with the ley lines the way a tuning fork interacts with a piano string. You amplify the convergence. The convergence amplifies you. And the resonance between you is thinning the barrier." I set down my spoon. The rice went cold. "Are you saying I'm the reason the barrier is failing?" "I'm saying you're part of a system. The deep one, the barrier, the convergence, the founding bloodlines, it's all connected. An ecosystem. When Vera was alive, she was part of the system too. Her gift balanced the equation. When she died, the balance shifted. When you arrived, it shifted again." Cora's eyes held mine. "The barrier isn't failing, Marlow. It's adapting. To you, to your gift, to whatever you're becoming." "What am I becoming?" "That," Cora said, "is the question that everything depends on." She cleared the dishes. Left me sitting at the table with the taste of other dimensional spinach in my mouth, and the understanding that my presence in Orgasta Cliffs wasn't incidental. It wasn't even coincidental. It was gravitational. I'd been drawn here the way the founding families had been drawn, by something in the deep water that needed a specific kind of person. A person who wanted. A person whose wanting was strong enough to thin the walls between worlds. The deep one hadn't just been calling to me. It had been calling me into being. My gift, my loneliness, my specific hunger for connection, all of it, shaped by a century of a trapped consciousness reaching toward the surface, looking for someone whose frequency matched its own. I was not just the seventh point. I was the response to a prayer the Deep One had been praying since 1889. Outside, the dawn was approaching. Dex was on the porch of the nearest yurt, whittling something from a piece of driftwood with a folding knife. His hands needed work the way other people's lungs needed air, and in the absence of crab pots, whittling would do. His face in the pre-dawn light was serious, contemplative, the grin nowhere in evidence. He was thinking about the cave, about the ocean's offer, about the choice he'd made. I sat beside him. He didn't look up. The knife moved. Slow, precise strokes that peeled curls of wood from the driftwood in a way that was almost meditative. "What are you making?" I asked. "Don't know yet. I never know until it's done." He paused. "My grandfather used to say that about the ocean. You never know what you're hauling up until you pull the trap. Could be crab. Could be an octopus. Could be an old boot." Another stroke. "Could be a message from an interdimensional entity that wants to eat your soul." The Deep One didn't want to eat anyone's soul. "I know." He set down the knife. Looked at me. The blue eyes were tired, but underneath the exhaustion, something new. A clarity that hadn't been there before. "I felt it, Marlow, in the cave. When it offered me the ocean. It wasn't predatory. It was..." He searched for the word. "Hospitable. Like someone who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten how to be a good host, and they were trying too hard, and everything they offered was too much because they had so much to give, and no idea how to give it at a human scale. That's exactly what it was. Yeah." He picked up the knife again. Another stroke. "So we freed it. Sent it home. Good for us. But you saw what the book said. Dozens more, coming this way." He looked at the ocean, visible between the trees as a line of gray against the pre-dawn sky. "I can still feel them, Marlow. Even without the mark. The Moran thing, the listening, it's still there. I can feel them in the water. Moving, rising, and they don't feel like the Deep One. They feel different. Colder." He set down the knife. Took my hand. The contact was warm, calloused, grounding, and for the first time since the mark had appeared, touching Dex didn't produce a supernatural echo. Just his hand, just his warmth. Just the specific human finite weight of a man choosing to hold a woman's hand at the edge of the world. "Whatever's coming," he said, "we face it together. All three of us. No splitting up, no solo missions, no walking into sea caves alone because you have a feeling." He gave me a look. "Especially the sea caves. I make no promises about the sea caves. Kane. Fine, I'll bring back up to the sea caves." He squeezed my hand. We sat on the porch and watched the dawn come to the range. The light touching the yurts, the gardens, the cracked stone formation where something had emerged into a world it didn't understand. And I held his hand and felt nothing except warmth and the heartbeat of a man who loved me. And I thought, this is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. Theo appeared in the doorway behind us, 2 cups of terrible instant coffee in his hands, and his cracked glasses slightly askew. He looked at us, Dex and me, holding hands on the porch, and his face did something complicated and beautiful. Longing, followed by acceptance, followed by a tentative hope. "Room for one more?" he asked. I pulled him down beside me. Dex shifted to make space. 3 people on a porch in the Alaskan dawn, shoulder to shoulder, warm against the cold. And if this wasn't the answer to every question the Deep One had ever asked about human connection, I didn't know what was. Chapter 9, Glass Floor. We broke every speed limit the gravel road had to offer getting back to Augusta Cliffs, which was impressive, given that the road didn't technically have speed limits, just varying degrees of suicidal ambition. The back room of the abyss was a crime scene designed by something that didn't respect the laws of physics. Seawater pooled on the floor, seeping upward through the cracked glass. Upward against gravity, with the slow deliberation of something that was choosing to defy reality rather than being forced to. The ocean was 200 feet below, but it was reaching through the shattered floor like a hand through a window. Harold Volkov sat in a chair facing the broken glass. 60 years old, patriarch of the Volkov founding family. The fishing fleet, the money, dead, with the binding symbols on his chest and salt water in his lungs, arranged as if he'd been watching something rise from below and had chosen to meet it sitting down. The cracks in the glass formed the pattern, the binding symbols etched into the floor itself. The back room of the abyss was now an anchor point. Wren stood outside, shaken for the first time since I'd known them. They were leaning against the wall, arms crossed, their usually fluid composure replaced by something rigid and careful, the stance of a person holding themselves together through geometry. "He came in alone at closing," Wren said. "Asked for the back room, locked the door." I heard chanting, then a sound like... They paused. Like a whale song played through a cathedral, then silence. I knelt beside Harold Volkov and touched his hand. The vision rewrote everything I thought I knew about the murders. Harold wasn't a victim, he was a volunteer. I saw the meeting. Harold in a private room at Kessler Lodge, across a table from Isolde. She was calm, precise, laying out the design of the circle with the clarity of an architect presenting blueprints. Harold listened, asked questions, not fearful, thoughtful. The kind of man who made decisions after due diligence. He asked what would happen to the town. She said, "Nothing falls, something rises. And Augusta Cliffs becomes what it was always meant to be, a bridge." He said yes. His death was not murder. It was a ritual he'd consented to. And in his final moments, as the binding language wrote itself into his flesh, and the ocean surged in, the Deep One's consciousness brushed against his, and what Harold Volkov experienced in the last 3 seconds of his life was transcendence. Connection so total, so overwhelming, that it dissolved the boundaries of his selfhood and let him experience briefly what it was to be part of something vast. He died smiling. He died in a state of bliss so pure, it left an afterimage in the psychic residue that was, undeniably, beautiful. I came out of the vision crying. Not from horror, from the beauty of it. And the fact that an experience that beautiful could be the product of a process that killed people, the fact that transcendence and murder could wear the same face, was the most frightening thing I'd encountered since this began. Theo's apartment became our war room. He'd cleared the medical journals from his desk, including, I noted with a chill that I carefully concealed, the stack that had hidden the Meridian folder, and spread out maps of Augusta Cliffs and the surrounding coastline. We marked the anchor points with red pins, 6 now set, arranged in a geometric pattern that was both mathematical and organic, like a snowflake drawn by something that understood symmetry on a molecular level. The 7th point, mine, would complete the circle and open the door. Permanently. "Not a breach," Theo said, his analytical mind mapping the implications with the speed of someone who'd been trained to assess threats. "A door, stable, bidirectional. If the circle completes, the barrier between our dimension and whatever's on the other side becomes permanently permeable at this location." "What does that mean for the town?" Dex asked. "I don't know. It could mean integration, the supernatural becoming part of daily reality. It could mean invasion. It could mean something we don't have a framework to predict. So basically, it could be fine, or it could be the apocalypse." "Those are the poles, yes." I went to the sea cave alone. Because I have a pathological need to confront danger without backup, and because Isolde wouldn't show herself to a group. She appeared as if she'd been waiting, which she had probably for 35 years. Her offer was precise. Become the 7th anchor willingly. In return, the door opens without violence. The Deep One rises gently. The town evolves. My gift expands beyond anything I'd imagined. She touched my hand and gave me a vision of the possible future. Me in full power, unafraid, ungloving, living fully in my skin for the first time. Dex free of the mark. Theo unburdened by his lies. A town alive with subtle magic, the veil thin, the strange and the beautiful coexisting in the open. I wanted it. God help me, I wanted it. But I thought of the trio under the aurora, messy, imperfect, human, and I said no. Theo told me about the outside threat. His contacts, the Meridian, though he still wouldn't say the word, were sending people. A containment team. They would treat the supernatural elements of Orgasta Cliffs as a contamination to be cauterized. Everyone with abilities, me, Eleanor, the range practitioners, neutralized. 48 hours, Theo said. Dex. Then we solve this in 48 hours. The War Council convened at the Vale between us three, Sage, Wren, and Eleanor Kessler, who arrived in a car that cost more than the building and said, "If you're going to save my town, you'll need a Kessler." The plan was elegant and terrifying. Each remaining anchor needed to be disrupted simultaneously. Teams at each point, and at the center, the geographic heart of the circle, me, alone, connected psychically to all 6 points at once. There has to be another way, Theo said. There isn't, Dex said. I know, I said. That night, Vera appeared more solid than she'd ever been. The effort was visible. She was burning through whatever energy constituted a ghost's reserve. There's something I never told you about the night I sealed Isolde. Tell me. I didn't do it to save the town. Her spectral eyes were full of something I'd never seen in them before. Grief without the protective lacquer of humor. She asked me to. She saw what the Deep One would do to her, not destroy her. Absorb her. Erase everything she was, and replace it with itself. She chose prison over annihilation. A pause. And she's been in that prison so long she's forgotten why she asked. Vera began to fade. Her form thinning like smoke. Her last words, whispered from a distance that was increasing with every syllable. The Deep One doesn't want a door, Marlow. It wants a body, and it's been grooming you since birth. Expand the glass floor murder scene and Wren conversation. Before heading to Theo's apartment for the War Council, I stopped at the Abyss. The main room was undamaged, and Wren was cleaning with the grim determination of someone processing trauma through tidiness. Tell me about Harold Volkov. Wren set down a glass. Harold was steady. Same booth every Thursday for 30 years. Old-fashioned, made properly. He tipped well. Asked about my grandmother. Remembered birthdays. A pause. He was the best of the founding families. He volunteered for the ritual. I know, that last night. The chanting from the back room. I've heard a lot in this bar, Marlow. Confessions, lies. The sound the ocean makes when a storm hits the cliff hard enough to shake the building. None of it sounded like what I heard from that room. What did it sound like? Like the ocean was singing. And Harold was singing back, harmonizing. Like they'd been rehearsing their whole lives. Wren's dark eyes found mine. The Volkovs had weather magic. Harold's grandfather used to say they didn't control the weather, they translated it. They heard what the ocean was saying and spoke it back in human language. Harold's last conversation was with the Deep One. And it was the conversation he'd been waiting his whole life to have. Wren picked up another glass. Your fisherman nearly died on the cliffs. Your doctor is playing spy games. And you keep walking toward the thing that could destroy you. Because the wanting is stronger than the fear. That's exactly what it is. You want to know. You want to touch the mystery and download its secrets, even when they might eat you alive. Wren shrugged. You and Harold have more in common than you think. Theo's apartment. War room. Maps spread across every surface. Anchor points marked with red pins. Dex stood at the window, looking at the harbor. Dawn light on dark water. My family helped build the cage. The Morans. We were the navigators. We found the thing and helped trap it. He turned. If the cage is wrong, if the Deep One has been suffering in there because our ancestors put it there, then maybe opening the door isn't the worst idea. The room was quiet. We need to understand what Isolde actually wants, I said. Not what we assume, what she actually wants. So I went to the sea cave. Alone. Because walking toward dangerous supernatural phenomena without backup was apparently my core personality trait. Isolde was there. Standing in the cave entrance with the tide lapping at her boots, her dark hair loose, her ageless face illuminated by the bioluminescent symbols on the walls behind her. She was beautiful in the way that a blade was beautiful. All edge, all purpose, nothing wasted. Her offer was precise. Become the seventh anchor willingly. In return, the door opens gently. The deep one rises peacefully. My gift expands beyond anything I could imagine. Dex's mark vanishes. She touched my hand and gave me the vision of the possible future. Me in full power. No gloves, no flinching, no fear. My hands on Dex's face without drowning in his memories. My fingers in Theo's hair without being overwhelmed by his longing. Touch, finally, as something joyful instead of dangerous. I wanted it. The vision answered every lonely prayer I'd ever prayed. To be whole, to be unafraid. To touch and be touched without cost. But I thought of the trio under the aurora, messy, mortal, imperfect, and I remembered that the vision's perfection was the tell. Real connection wasn't perfect. Real connection was Dex forgetting not to touch me and apologizing with his eyes. Theo making tea at 2 a.m. and choosing cups by how they felt. 3 people on a cliff, terrified, choosing each other anyway. No, I said, not like this. The War Council. The veil between. Sage, Eleanor, Wren, the trio, and Vera's ghost flickering in the rare books section. Eleanor arrived in pearls. If you're going to save my town, you'll need a Kessler. The plan took shape through pre-dawn hours, fueled by Eleanor's scotch and the creative desperation of people with no good options. Disrupt the remaining anchors simultaneously. Teams at each point. And at the center, me. Alone. Connected to all 6 points psychically. There has to be another way, Theo said. There isn't, Dex said. I know, I said. Vera appeared that night, more solid than ever, burning reserves she couldn't replenish. The deep one doesn't want a door, Marlow. It wants a body. It's been grooming you since birth. More detail on the War Council at the Veil Between. The War Council convened at midnight at the Veil Between, my bookshop, my territory, 200 volumes of occult knowledge watching from the shelves like a jury of leather-bound experts. Sage arrived first, bringing the range's energy with her, the particular calm that wasn't really calm but was actually immense power, carefully contained. She sat in the reading chair by the rare book section, and the chair seemed to settle around her, as if the furniture recognized authority. Eleanor arrived next, in a car that was too expensive for the roads, and a coat that was too beautiful for the weather. She surveyed the bookshop with the expression of a woman assessing real estate, which, given that the Kesslers had originally owned this building before selling it to my grandmother in 1975, was probably accurate. Wren came in from the abyss, smelling like bar soap and seawater, their septum ring catching the light. They sat on the floor with their back against the counter and looked completely at home. Wren had the gift of belonging in any space, as if the environment rearranged itself to accommodate them. Dex sprawled in the booth by the window. Long legs, arms spread along the backrest, taking up the space of approximately 2 regular-sized humans. Theo sat beside him, knee to knee, the contact deliberate and grounding. I stood at the center, my shop, my team, my crisis, and Vera flickering in the rare book section, barely visible but present. Watching over us the way she'd always watched over the town, from the margins, with fierce attention and the absolute conviction that she knew best. The remaining anchor points need to be disrupted simultaneously, I said. If we take them out sequentially, the circle compensates, redistributes its energy to the remaining points. We've seen this. When 3 went down during the first assault, the remaining 3 got stronger. How do we coordinate simultaneous disruption across multiple locations? Theo asked, his analytical mind already mapping logistics. Teams. I pointed to the map on the wall. Theo's map, red pins marking anchor points. Each team takes 1 point. Sage and the elders take the residual energy at the range stone formation. Eleanor handles the abyss. Dex takes the sea cave. And the deep water point? Sage asked. That's me. I project my consciousness into the ocean and negotiate directly with the deep one. Negotiate? Eleanor's eyebrow could have cut glass. Not fight, not contain. Negotiate. The deep one isn't an enemy, it's a prisoner. If we can offer it passage, a way home that isn't Isolde's permanent door, it might cooperate. The room was quiet. Outside, the ocean's constant conversation with the cliffs was audible through the walls, the soundtrack of every important decision made in this town for 135 years. The psychic projection will require an anchor, Sage said. Someone to hold the tether between your consciousness and your body while you're in the deep. If the tether breaks... I know. I didn't look at Theo. I didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who the anchor would be. Major expansion of the sea cave scene and Isolde confrontation. The sea cave was different the second time. The first visit had been investigative, clinical, careful, 3 people with flashlights cataloging evidence. This time I was alone, and the cave knew it. The bioluminescent symbols on the walls pulsed as I entered, their rhythm syncing with my heartbeat, as if the cave was reading my vital signs. The air was thick with salt and the particular metallic taste of old magic, blood magic, I realized. The Hargroves had used this cave before. The walls had absorbed centuries of ritual. Isolde was standing in the deepest chamber, where the stone column met the cave floor, where the ceiling dripped with mineral water that sparkled in the bioluminescent light. She was wearing dark clothing, practical, modern, but her stillness was ancient. She stood the way the cliff stood, rooted, patient, beyond the reach of urgency. "You came alone," she said. Not surprised. Calculating. "You wouldn't have come if I hadn't." "No, I don't show myself to groups. Groups are unpredictable. Individuals can be..." A pause. "Understood. You mean manipulated." "I mean understood. There's a difference, though I grant you the line is thin." She moved through the cave toward me, her steps silent on the wet stone. Up close, her agelessness was more apparent, not preserved, not frozen, but somehow outside the flow of time. Her skin was unmarked by the 35 years of imprisonment. Her eyes were dark and clear and lit with an intelligence that had been sharpening itself in isolation since before I was born. "You've spoken with the entity," she said. "The one from the stone formation. You've felt what it offers. Communion. Merger. The dissolution of boundaries. The end of loneliness." Her voice carried weight on those words. The weight of someone who knew loneliness the way the ocean knew pressure. Intimately, constantly, at every depth. "I've been alone for 35 years, Marlow. In a space without dimension or sensation. No touch, no sound, no light except what I generated myself. Do you know what 35 years of absolute isolation does to a consciousness? It radicalizes it. It clarifies it." She stopped an arm's length away. "I've had 35 years to think about what matters. And what matters is this. There is a being in the water beneath your cliffs that has been alone even longer than I have. Over a century of isolation, over a century of reaching toward the surface, toward warmth, toward contact, and being pushed back by a cage your ancestors built. The cage kept the town safe. The cage kept the town ignorant. Safe and ignorant are not the same thing." She reached into her coat and produced something. A small stone, smooth, warm, glowing with the same bioluminescent light as the cave walls. "This is a communion stone. Hold it and you'll feel what the deep one feels. Not a psychic vision, a direct emotional transmission. Its current state, its current pain." I took the stone. The warmth was immediate, deeper than physical heat, a warmth that seemed to radiate from inside the stone's molecular structure. And with the warmth, a feeling, loneliness so vast it had its own geography. Mountains of isolation, rivers of silence, an ocean of wanting with no shore in sight. I dropped the stone. It clattered on the wet cave floor and the sound echoed, amplified by the cave's acoustics into something that sounded like a sob. "You felt it," Isolde said. "Yes. Now imagine feeling that for a century. Imagine being that lonely for 100 years, with the surface, warmth, touch, connection, just out of reach. Imagine pressing against a barrier you didn't build, reaching toward a world that caged you, and being pushed back every time." Her eyes were intense. "The Deep One isn't a monster, Marlow. It's a prisoner, and I am going to free it. By opening a permanent door that could destabilize reality. By opening a door. Period. The permanence is a feature, not a bug. The barrier between dimensions was never meant to be absolute. It's a natural membrane that the founding families artificially thickened. Making it permanent again, making it thin again, the way it was before the pact, is restoration, not destruction." Her argument was compelling. That was what made her dangerous. Not the blood magic, not the binding language, not the 35 years of planning. It was the fact that she wasn't wrong. The Deep One was suffering. The cage was cruel. The founding family's pact had been an act of imprisonment dressed up as protection. But being right about the problem didn't make her right about the solution. "A permanent door is uncontrolled," I said. "You can't predict what comes through. The Deep One might be the first, but it won't be the last. I've designed the binding to filter. Filters fail. Systems break down. You're proposing to punch a permanent hole in the fabric of reality based on the assumption that your design will hold forever." I met her eyes. 35 years ago, you asked my grandmother to seal you away because you were afraid of what you'd become. The woman who made that choice, the woman who chose prison over losing control, would she trust a permanent door? Isolde went still. The cave was silent except for dripping water and the hum of the cymbals. "That woman died in the seal," she said quietly. "The woman who came out is different. Maybe. Or maybe she's the same woman with 35 years of pain distorting her judgment." Dex was quiet for a long time after I described Harold's vision. We were walking from the abyss to Theo's apartment, the three of us, the pre-dawn streets empty and cold, and still lit by the fading aurora ring overhead. "He died happy," Dex said finally. His voice was strange, rough, almost reverent. "Harold Volkoff, who I've known since I was a kid, who taught me how to tie a bowline when I was 6, who gave the worst fishing advice of anyone on this coast and the best whiskey. He died happy." "He died in ecstasy," I said. "The Deep One gave him total connection. The thing every human being craves and never fully achieves, being completely known by another consciousness. Harold experienced it, for 3 seconds. And it was the best thing that ever happened to him." Dex stopped walking. The harbor was behind us. The clinic was ahead. We were standing on Main Street between the hardware store and the grocery, and the absurdity of having a conversation about ecstatic supernatural death in front of Gladys, the postmistress's darkened windows, was not lost on me. "I felt something like it," Dex said. "In the cave. When the Deep One reached through the mark and showed me what merger would be like. The loneliness just evaporating. Being part of something so vast that the concept of being alone stopped making sense." He looked at his marked hand. The symbols were moving, slowly, writing themselves deeper. "I understand why Harold said yes. I understand why Isolde is doing what she's doing. If you'd been alone for a century and someone offered you the end of loneliness, you'd take it," Theo said quietly. He'd been silent through the walk, processing, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who understood loneliness from personal experience. "You'd take it even if the cost was high. Because loneliness at that scale isn't just painful. It's terminal. It kills you slowly from the inside. And by the time someone offers you a way out, you'll agree to almost anything." We stood on the dark street, 3 people who understood loneliness better than most, who'd each built their lives around managing it in different ways. Dex through physical connection and constant company. Theo through professional purpose and emotional control. Me through avoidance and armor and the careful maintenance of distance from every human being on Earth. And now we'd found each other. 3 lonely people who fit together like puzzle pieces. Dex's openness balancing Theo's restraint, Theo's precision balancing Dex's chaos, my gift connecting them both through a channel that bypassed the walls everyone else had to navigate. The deep one isn't the only lonely thing around here, Dex said. And he took Theo's hand with his left, and mine with his right, and we stood in the middle of Main Street holding hands like 3 idiots in love, and the aurora ring pulsed overhead. And somewhere beneath the cliffs, the deep one hummed its patient song, and for a moment, just a moment, the loneliness that had defined all 3 of our lives went quiet. Then Theo said, "We should probably go plan how to save the town before the extra-governmental paramilitary organization arrives." And the moment broke, and we walked to his apartment, and the hand-holding lasted the entire way.